obviously there has to do with rotation as well. Clearly, I don't know everything, but I see that connection.
You
I find
don't?
it fascinating.
Oh man, I thought you knew everything.
Well, okay, I'll get on that.
Okay.
I will.
All right. Next week. You'll know by next week.
I'll know it by now. I'll be an expert next
week.
That's
awesome.
What, did anyone not do the reading?
Looking forward to
it. Anyway. Continuing the Electric Views April 23rd show, we will be talking about art and light and the advances that are made through their combination in the sciences, how they merge together, and what they can tell us about the nature of the universe. Please like and subscribe below.
In the comment section, I posted 2 images that I've been super fascinated with this week. That one is the clearest image, quote, clearest image of a sunspot yet to be recorded, and then the second one is I filtered it through, but I didn't change any of the levels. I just put it through a series of already formed filters, so they put things in these orders. And I love this because you can actually see the beta delta mixing. You can see that spiral cord in the center where it's turning into something else. You see? Wow. And then the filaments that are spinning together. And you can also see, I could probably, I'll do it with my phone.
This should be your art form, man. Like, all I would do is just put
this is my art form. Hello!
No, I meant, like, there should be, like, Heather Stargazer and just having...
Have you seen my Instagram?
I think I see a
I think I'm not on your Instagram.
I think I'm seeing some ancient Chinese dragon face in it.
Yeah,
I'm loving this look.
Right. The 2 eyes there in the center, and the snout.
But then it's like then Phoenix. It's just once you realize it's basically just you're looking at nature, and then here's a rework of the actual dynamics. So.
I see this. Could you imagine? You're on Earth. Okay, now obviously not underneath this, but something like those prominences. If you can envision some of these jumping through the sky, and what they would have looked like to people, because remember they're not connected to the Earth; they're connected to the parts above the Earth, like the ionosphere stuff. I mean, it would have been like the best special effects ever, and the twists and how material goes up and then comes back down would be so scary because it's supernaturally weird. Like, you're not familiar with it. You're not familiar with material that does that has to respond to electric fields only. Like, I know that you think that gravity matters to you. That's why they probably felt supernatural. They're like, no, it lifted the mountain up, twisted it, and then dropped it right beside itself, and then killed everyone in that village. Yeah. Gods are assholes, but they're supernaturally assholes. I can envision this. It's just so horrifying to them, what they would have went through, and it would have made a true believer out of me. The only reason I wouldn't freak out is if I knew something about electricity, but if I didn't, that would have been it. I would be convinced they are gods, and I would have to worship them. I would sacrifice people in their name.
I don't know. I think they were more sophisticated than that.
I'm joking, but you get my meaning.
I know.
Okay.
I do.
Okay.
I get the inference too. The thing that's really strikes me is, you just rework some of the colors on here, and it actually, you interpret what's going on differently. You have a different insight into what's going on. That's kind of the beauty of having these tools available to us to play around with.
Form follows function.
Yeah. Like what Buddy was saying.
Is it like each filter, right? Like, could that be like an X-ray, or could that be, what else is coming through? Besides that, there were 2 of them that I sent that were in the drawing filter. I actually did a whole ton of them, but I'll spare you guys all that shit, and you can just check out these ones. Now, this one was with a little bit of the contrast played with, and it's really interesting because I was trying to get behind that spiral. Right, I was trying to get behind that helix spiral just a little bit, right, because it was getting washed out. Yeah. So I lowered brightness and then ran it through the filter again, and you can see the difference here. And actually, all of you see there, you can see back behind it that there's more going on.
Right, because you get it down in the blacks. There's all this detail,
and it's not black.
You don't. you don't pick up on with your eyes, and if you flip it, you can see detail that you wouldn't normally sense,
Right.
But when you take this image and you go back to the original image, suddenly all of these details become visible.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll see them. You're like, oh, there is some depth. So some of these are see how it's washed out because it was so dark.
Right.
So I was trying to get that to come out a little bit. So that one is without a contrast change. This one, there is a contrast change level. And it's really, really interesting because you can actually see that larger helix shape in a foreground. There's a background behind it. There's a depth behind it. There is something there behind it that is kind of washed out in this spectrum.
Right.
It very much exists.
Mm-hmm.
So can we use tools like this to help us actually see what's going on below the surface? Just taking the images that we already have and putting instead of putting them through these certain colors, go ahead and put them because these types of apps or these types of filters are programmed to take variations in gradation, saturation, hue and value, and line quality. And so each of those individual variations is assigned to another specific variation. So it will be consistent throughout. It's not like, one space is going to be, I don't know how to explain it, but it's going to be consistent throughout to match the original image. How much can we see? Because sometimes when I look at these ones, especially when they're huge coronal holes, is like, there is something down there. This is not like a hollow space where we can like look down into it. Like you can almost see a surface or at least another layer, right? Down in there. And
these definitions.
Yeah.
It's almost like currents within currents.
Yes.
Just like we're seeing from the...
And then you start seeing this, like those formations, So like the Southwest, so you start seeing this.
Well, I wasn't even going to go there. That actually, you're right. But I was thinking more about that image of the later stellar cloud that Jim showed. How you're seeing parts dark lines as well as bright lines. And the twist is obvious. You can see all of these are twisting in the using the right hand rule. It's just so. All I can say, Heather, is if you better watch out because this is what happened with Halton Arp. He started adjusting the contrast of pictures and showing connections, and people were not happy.
Yeah, no, this is where you start really gaining insight into stuff.
Well, we love it, but we love it. Yeah.
It's also how Maxwell defined the spectrum, right? Through artist paint, looking at how artists broke up their paint on their palette. How he realized the electromagnetic spectrum things. I don't know. A lot of them go back. A lot of them go back to artists, and because we have a different eye, and we're not going to see things under this empirical umbrella that other people were like, "Hey, did you see how that would look at that?"
This one does.
We just kind of do stuff because we don't know we can't, so we just do it anyway. We're not held. We're bound by certain rules that other people are, which gives us the freedom to look at things and also to say things without being worried about, my credibility. I'm not a scientist, right? So if I'm not right about something, that doesn't matter to me. Did the pretty picture affect you? Did it make you think differently? Did the words change your vision of something? You know what I mean? That's where we're at. We're here to kind of see things differently, to express things differently there from a different perspective, which I think is great. And I love that you guys are here to let us do that. It's like fueling this thought. But back to a different subject, about these twists and these turns and the specific color vibrations that are coming, light vibrations that are coming off of different planets. I think you're right. I love how you say that Earth could be the sun of some kind. I think that anything could be anything else if given the proper harmonics, right? Like a G could be a C or a B if you put the capo on the neck properly, right? In the right spot. Like things can change their tune, they can change their note, they can change their value, their saturation. Things can change, red shift, blue shift, if they can change in that perspective or in that way, then they could totally change into a different type of ray as the wavelengths decay, right? We talked about that. Any wave could travel the spectrum as it is elongated and go from visual to radio to gamma to wherever. It could be any of those things and take on the shape necessary for the interaction of the other beams around it at that time. And so more so, or not just electricity or just magnetism, it's a very sound, vibrational, harmonic action that forms these things, keeps them in not only in the shape that they are, but the place that they are too. And when we see things like this, when we see things glowing that shouldn't glow, when we see things behaving in ways that they shouldn't behave, maybe it isn't necessarily just electricity. Maybe it's the sound that's making them vibrate like that, right? Cold fusion.
I think we talked about that with the with why did you build ancient pyramids with certain shapes to make certain notes, because they rang and they have certain frequencies to them, like the Great Pyramids of C, for example. I don't know why, but somebody who's more intelligent than me in regards to sound could tell you why, but I've heard.
C major just sounds right.
I think it is. But what I was going to say is that I think your idea of frequencies and vibrations with regards to this, it's even more so than that, because if we could accept that it has an effect on, say, our biology, DNA and whatever, it seems it just by the descriptions of the ancients in the past that it did indeed change, and it affected them. And if we go further than that, it could be the difference between DNA expressing a Tyrannosaurus Rex or a chicken. It could be on that level, on how things work out over time. Because there could be much more to it than we even think. But of course, no one likes this, because what we're basically building is a world where, just like that, things could be really messed up. And that is not something that people who want to be told that everything's going to be fine, it's going to be fine, don't you worry. No, the Chicken Little was wrong, the sky isn't falling, everyone just proceed normally, go to work, do your job, come back, make me money. Okay, just keep doing that. Everything's no, it's fine. Millions of years was like that last time. Don't worry about that. But I think that's just, don't get me wrong, the plants aren't going willy-nilly anymore in the sky as well. They're but you know what I mean? Like, they're not exchanging positions like comets are. But that doesn't mean that we couldn't enter in to, as Jim said, an area of differing charge, and therefore it directly affects the amount of power our sun is going to generate. And this could, of course, make. Well, could you imagine if we got twice as much current, the aurora would be twice as big. If you start hitting certain levels, you'll start seeing that the aurora will start covering the whole sky. That's just an electrical reaction just to do with current. All the vibrations, of course, after that would change. What would happen to children born under this new thing? Would we see those little, like those picture he just had there of the Earth with the little cycles going along? I don't even know where it was. Don't worry about it though. But just pictures. But
yeah,
the loops, because those are glowing on certain planets like Jupiter. Those bands, you can see the thermal energy as they run into each other. But they're produced by electricity doing this rotation as they go through these bands. But they're each vibrating a different way. All of this is related now, and it's A, way more complex, and B, not something that the people who make their career on saying everything's going to be fine are going to be. You're not paid for saying the sky is falling, run for your lives either. But that's
well. What if it's not that? But what if it's not that?
No,
what if it's just a cohesive evolution, right? If a child was born under that specific effect, everything else on Earth would also be reborn under that specific effect. So wouldn't they all be, though different from us, still in harmony with each other?
Well, that's that's my feeling as well.
Growth, survival, as opposed to like doomsday. You know what I mean? Like
I'm not saying that I would be saying doomsday, but I guarantee you, the end result of this talk of catastrophism and the description of what we're talking about means that everything you know is wrong. Nothing is stable. We're just at this point of equilibrium right now. But this could change tomorrow if we enter into a different thing, or a common system, or something starts messing it up. Just things are not as stable. They are self-correcting, as Don Scott pointed out. This system is equilibrium,
calibrate.
Self-calibrating, yeah, it's a good term. It's at a balance point, but the balance could, of course, if something changes somewhere, it affects everything else in the circuit as well. So, we felt
that
other.
That's where that whole self-healing thing comes in, though. Vessel function filaments. That's awesome that they can. Those experiments where something's propagating along a filament, that it can, after some kind of disruption, it can restore itself to exactly the same phase and everything for like a packet, which means that if our solar system is traveling along a filament and then it did get disrupted in the past, we could end up with exactly the same solar system dynamics. I'm talking same orbital eccentricities, orbital periodicities. That's the part that you get if you get that our solar system is propagating along a Bessel function filament. That's the key thing about these Bessel Gaussian filaments. Like even when light propagates that way, but the most exciting thing is that after some kind of obstruction, it restores itself to where a packet flowing along that goes back to an identical, what they would say is spatial temporal relationships, but it really is a way to explain how this is a problem I always had. I am into the catastrophic events that happened in the past. There's all kinds of evidence for like geophysical pole shifts, radical planetary, changes in orbits. But there's also equal amounts of evidence for these recurring cycles to where the mainstream can even see this like 41,000 year obliquity cycle going back in the climate data for multiple periods. And that was the part that's a problem. Like, how do you get those two ideas together? How do you get these recurring cycles that you can trace back for ad nauseum and have radical disruptions without going to a different stable configuration? But that's where the Bessel function idea is so important. It says that you can go back to exactly the same thing afterwards. I mean, and to me, that's the key to putting together all these guys like Dave Talbot will provide you overwhelming evidence that things were not always the same in our solar system, but other guys like Walter Cruttenden and those guys will give you overwhelming evidence that there's all these evidence of long-term periodical cycles that match the ones that are going on now, and that's the discrepancy that the Bessel function thing fixes. Okay, sorry about going on.
No,
again.
It's great. No, it's great. Really good.
Considering how much I babble, please,
there
has been no crime committed by you. Trust me.
What about the prismatic refraction that breaks different light down into different colors? So by the time we get it, it might be the refraction of one specific ray, and we're seeing it as like 3 or 4. Actually, we do see that. How do we get that not very right?
Well, like things like the Einstein cross and other things like that. If it's not quote unquote gravitational lensing, then it's more than likely refraction through these atmospheres that have been pulled together that we're starting to see around galaxies. Basically, the density is changing of this, even though we can't see this hydrogen, this just these waves, but the light goes around it, and these galaxies are bending the light. But because it's a refraction, most of these are blue, and that's this decided blue tendency towards these Einstein rings, they were called, lends us to the supposition or the idea that this is refraction, and another sort of hit against Einstein, I guess.
Yeah,
I guess it goes back to redshift, blue shift, that if they're all refracted down to the specific wavelength, wouldn't they all even out at blue, no matter what color they started at?
Why would that be?
I'm not sure if I understand. It's a spectral line, and it can shift a little bit in its spectrum.
No, that's a really good question, and I just stumbled onto something, an observation that I've been aware of for a while. But right here, there's a star Castor, which is really made up of 3 stars. But what the mainstream says is each of those 3 stars is a pair of stars. But what's interesting is each of those pairs are identical stars, except that they're so close together that they can't visually resolve them. So what they're saying is that there's 3 pairs of stars, and each of those pairings are made of identical stars. So my question is, though, what if we're seeing double images of all 3 of those stars? It's one star. That's why the spectrums match for each pair is one star. But what they're seeing is what we're talking about here is that the reason they think they're 2 stars is they see this spreading of spectral lines. So they think one is coming towards us, is blue shifted, the other one's going away from us. And they think that they're these identical stars that are spiraling around. But how come it's not one star where the spectral line is splitting? One more blue and one more red. That would also make sense. And
right.
What makes more sense is that there's 3 pairs of all the 3 stars are different from each other, but they're made up of pairs of identical stars. That's where
identical is very hard to digest.
Right. So that's where you would think that we're actually getting double images just with spectral line, or one image of spectral lines, especially since they can't resolve visually the binaries. They're too close to detect. The only thing they see is this, what seems to be like an average red or blue shift, and then all of a sudden one set of spectral lines goes one way as the other goes the other way, and they think that is because of rotation towards and away from us. So that's like I've got to look into that. I just stumbled on that today. I don't know how I missed that this whole time. But what's more interesting about that is that happens to be a star that's kind of on this curving filament that we're on, but we're looking at it kind of obliquely, like we're looking at it almost edge on through this filament. In other words, we're looking through a lot of this filament that connects us to get to that other star. So that there's something there. I'm not saying I have the answer, but it's unbelievable to me that we should have 3 pairs of all different stars, and yet each of those is made up of those identical pairs. I don't buy that.
Very cool.
Or is there like a reflection, like an oscillation of each other, and they're creating a wave within each other that's sending the light in 2 different directions? Like they are somehow prisming themselves. Like one more picture.
Maybe we're cross-eyed.
Cross-eyed. Maybe, probably.
Well, it's interesting though. We have this property of, like, we know what, like bifringence. I'm probably pronouncing, is that birefringence, where you can get a split image, but again, it's only looking obliquely, and not when you look directly in. You get one image, but you get two different refracted images when you look obliquely into it. And maybe the same thing's going on.
What you're really saying is that one of those is real and the other one's a mirage. It's kind of
they're both. Maybe they're both.
They're both a mirage.
I mean, there's something behind it, but it's they're both.
I'm just.
They're both a distortion of one. Right?
Yes, like they're causing their own image to like rise up like off of like a hot road. I love that.
Yeah.
That's. And then the way they're bending, so it's coming in a wave. That second, that reflected miraged image, it's not a still mirror image. It's a wavy image, right?
Mm-hmm.
Think about it. It's bending just like that. So it would be confusing in that way. That's a really great way of thinking of it, because there's this when you look at a light through a prism and you can see like it will create this hollow space that doesn't really exist if you have enough cuts in the interior of the glass. It will create rooms and rooms and rooms inside that glass that don't really exist. It's like a hall of mirrors, and each one of those is like slightly broken down, but exactly the same as the thing that as whatever it is it's reflecting. So that's the only, I mean, there are identical twins in real life. That does happen. There is that splitting of the same nuclei that creates two identical pairs, like clones of each other. But for it to happen in three sets is really, that is where you're like, okay, could that possibly really happen? You know? And then it makes me think of other ways too, like the way these filters work and things are assigned to different things so maybe the waves themselves are diluting. Like if a red wave in color theory, if a red wave ran into a green wave, you'd have like a brown weird wave. If a yellow wave painted itself over a purple wave, you'd have a weird brown wave. You know, it isn't that because they kind of cancel each other out. They neutralize the tone of one another. I have so many questions about how we're actually seeing what we're seeing out there because of the way that it all interacts with each other. So, what do we really have a clear like that? It keeps coming back to me. Like objects in mirror are closer than they appear. And then when you take it down and it breaks down into that lowest vibration or highest vibration, whichever end of the visual light spectrum that you're on, if that's where the prismatic effect is going to even out, that's all of them are going to all of those rays are going to bend toward that frequency, and then that's the bottom of the frequency you're going to see. So that's where they're all going to lie. That's why I wondered if they were all blue, because they all just kind of, that was the stop point of visualization. Like we can't see it any further than that. Maybe they're still going further than that. We just can't see because it's blue. Am I way out there?
No.
I don't think so.
Oh
no, you're good.
You ever see this where it looks like there's water on the road? I've seen that.
Yeah.
Oh god, yes.
Wow.
Freaks me out.
Yeah. And there's not. It's
actually a reflection. Yeah. Reflection of the sky. Yeah.
And then I sent this other picture. I also sent a picture of the moon and Venus the other night because they rose up together. And then I put it through filters to look at it. And the gradation of the light was filtered in this weird way, which also makes me wonder, like, why did it pick up that light and assign it that way? But, and it did it several other pictures that did that too. I'm trying to send the original.
Yeah.
Oh, why did it have alignments like that?
Why did this blue image at the bottom, the light broke up in this way? And it did it in all of the pictures. There's these bands there, which also make me wonder about when light is refracted.
You got this one, that one, and
yeah. That the brightness of the hue might also change the color it's refracted back in.
Uh-huh.
I think this is very similar to something that we do with the light of to basically determine that there's a polarity to the light when it has direction, which is one of the ways we can tell if the light emitted is synchrotron or is it made by thermal emission.
Right.
And it's never really stated, but it's clear that it's not thermal on any star. It's all electromagnetic. There's only thermal around certain places where these collisions are occurring, where we consider heat to be occurring. But most of this is synchrotronic radiation. So it's basically currents spiraling in magnetic fields, which is very interesting. I wondered,
I pick that up.
Could stuff like that? Yeah, you can. I mean, this is just light here because I don't know exactly what's going on. But now that you showed me this, but I bet you if you start taking pictures of aurora and stuff like that, you're going to see more of this.
Yeah, exactly. Watch you can get probably down into much. I mean, you identify much more fine structure with a lot of this. This is case in point. Case in point here. Yeah. You're just that, and it's there. The variation is there because it's being picked up by the lens. It's just you can't see it.
Well, here's you
bring it out.
I'll send you one more that just shows the banding of it because I found it really, really. I'm just really interested in the way that the light's interpreted by the lens, and the way that is also next interpreted by the digital, right? Like, so how does the program see what the lens saw, see what reality is? You see how it's broken down into similar bands in this way in this filter, but they all broke it in these bands.
There's a part of me that I mean, even though I know this is probably not correct, but there's a part of me that wants to imagine that you're seeing the fact that it's going from light to dark. So it's the change in magnetic field through the Earth. Of course, it's not. You can't see that with a camera, but I'm picturing that the light is affected some way by that, and your camera's picking that up. But that's just an imagination. Clearly.
No, but I don't know if it is, Neil. I don't know if it is because that's exactly what I was wondering as well. Because a lot of they're on my Facebook page. If you guys want to look through the rest of them, there's like 4 or 5, 6 of them. I don't know, but I was like, I could assign these. This is the camera.
No, great.
This X-ray is coming in. This is microwave coming in because of the way that the gradation was changing, and because of the way that the light picked up different colors. Because it shouldn't have been at the top one, that yellowish green color. I don't know why. It went from basically what it did. It went from a warm to a cool to a bright to a cool to a neutral. Why did it do that? When it was a solid gradation of a single like a single saturation hue, it should have all been the same through. Things like that make me go.
Well, yeah, but of course we also have to understand that almost none of us understand these. I mean, if we just talk about optics and filtering, is one thing. How does our eye interpret it? How does lens interpret it? How does film interpret it? But once you start adding CCD cameras into the mix, I don't know how it.
Well, and then it's the algorithm,
and it
the
gets
algorithm
compressed
filter.
and other things like that. Like, I don't.
But even then, when you run this, it's like just identify the algorithm of the filter, and you're gonna be able to you can nail this down exactly.
You could.
That's right.
Baffled. I'm just going. This is pretty.
Well, even in standard old school photography, like photographic development, each of those hues or gradation value changes would be brought out by different chemicals, different lengths of times that things were allowed to soak in chemicals.
Fair enough. Yeah.
So you can play with so you still, the lens is still the lens, and that's still going to be like behaving and having me question 1,000 things about how a lens sees things. But then how that machine's vision is translated into a visual form for us is another layer. And so when we're looking out in outer space, or we're looking into our atmosphere, we're looking at the sun, we're looking even at Earth or each other, or anything that's going on, when we're looking at it through a camera, the camera is going to see it much differently than our visual eyes are going to see it. And we know they pick up weird things that our eyes can't see, because they're picking up light. They're picking up that wave variation, and we can use that. I mean, obviously, like that's the tool. And I want to know how clearly I know that it's a huge science, like when we were looking at all the hexagons for the Webb telescope, and you think of Hubble and how like some of these things still work, even if it's like just a micron off or it's just slightly not right. But really, because when you take that little bitty micron and you push it out into like a scope, you know, like from a point, and then it opens up to broaden to see the whole horizon of what it's looking, you know, like if you think of like a 1 point perspective looking out, that triangular shape of visions widens and spans out from the central point of the viewer. And if it's a micron off at the end, you know, at the widest point of the visual vision availability, that is going to make a huge difference in the end, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely, of course. I mean, that's the nature of all that stuff multiplies out. That's the focal point. So it's just going to go. You know, that's the precision is the game with all this stuff, and you can never get perfectly precise, no matter how far you go. As a mere mortal.
Yeah. I have high expectations.